Copyright Stanford University, all rights reserved.
Okay, let's get started. So good evening, everybody. My name is Hejun Ra, and welcome to our AIMS Workshop two-part series, Are You an Entrepreneur? This is part of the various campus-wide events that are going on, starting today for about 10 days, as part of Stanford E-Week, Entrepreneurship Week, which is hosted by the Stanford Entrepreneurship Network, SEN. So our organization, AIMS, as most of you know by now, is really focused on enabling postdocs who are interested in entrepreneurship and industry-related career paths through mentorship, education, and networking. So you can check out our events at aims.stanford.edu, and we welcome any professional to really join us in our LinkedIn website under AIMS. I would like to introduce, so we have a wonderful leadership team right now, about a dozen postdocs who are working hard to bring you these events. And we're actually now recruiting new members. So if you're a postdoc interested in getting involved, today there will be mostly in the red shirts around, the Stanford Entrepreneurship Week shirts. The facilitators are from the leadership team, so you could reach out to them with any questions you might have. And another thing is that we would really like to acknowledge and thank the Stanford Office of Technology Licensing for their sponsorship for this two-part AIMS workshop series. Okay, now it is my pleasure to introduce the speakers for tonight, John Gillespie Brown and Marietta Eden. John Gillespie Brown is the CEO founder of a number of successful high-tech companies, is an angel investor, and also an active mentor for at the Stanford University Engineering and Business Schools, the UC Berkeley Haas Business School, and the London Business School. He is the author of this book, So You Want to Be an Entrepreneur, which is the basis for the workshop today, where he donates his book proceeds to the Green Foundation, a nonprofit that empowers the world's poorest entrepreneurs. Marietta Eaton is a Silicon Valley leadership communications consultant, coach, and public speaking instructor, helping entrepreneurial tech leaders, scientists, and engineers achieve their goals. She brings a wealth of management expertise and high-tech leadership experience in management development and training, HR, marketing, and sales development. And she is also our AIMS leadership team communications coach. So with that, please join me in welcoming John Gillespie Brown and Marietta Eaton.
Welcome. Can you hear me in the back? So, my job is to welcome you and give an overview of our workshop. I also wanted to ask, is there a representative from OTL here tonight? Anyone from the Office of Technology and Licensing? Okay, you missed your opportunity to give a little 2-minute advertisement. That said, we want to thank you again for sponsorship. And I'd like you to do the job there. Thank you. You already heard the introductions. I do want to mention that our forms that are in the handout that you have are all online as well at this address, www.tobeanentrepreneur.com, which also includes John's blog that's very interesting. I enjoy reading it, as well as other interesting backup information. You can also take the entrepreneur quiz, which some of you may have done already, online, or have your friends, family, colleagues, or potential teammates take the quiz online. But everything you need is in the packet you have in front of you for this two-part workshop. So tonight we'll have a 2-hour session and come back to wrap it up next week from 6 to 8 p.m. And I do hope everyone returns because that's when we pull it all together. If you do want to purchase the book, it is, of course, available online, Kindle, as well as Stanford Bookstore. They have a pile of them at the information desk. So if you did choose to do that, it is available locally. It closes at 8 o'clock, but it's open until 8 o'clock this week and 6 o'clock on the weekends. All the material and the backup information that we're talking about, probably 90% of it is in the book, plus a lot more. And as you'll hear, the profits go to a very good cause. With that, I'll let John tell you more about what the cause is.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Can everyone hear me okay? I've just switched mics. Okay, great. Excuse me, I'm just getting over a little cold, so if I'm coughing a little bit, I apologize. So thank you very much for taking the time to come and visit with us. I'm hoping that in the next couple of hours we can entertain you as well as tell you a little bit about entrepreneurship. There's going to be a lot of working together with the folks around you and trying to make the whole process a little bit interactive. So hopefully you'll be prepared to just talk to your friends and colleagues that you have around you. It's going to be very important. The first thing I want to say, for those of you that are not entrepreneurs in the room or those that are thinking about being entrepreneurs, which I assume is the majority of you, that's the basis of the next 4 hours, 2 hours this week and 2 hours next week. What we're trying to do here is simply answer that question. Are you, right now, an entrepreneur? We really don't have the time to cover a huge amount of other details about the actual life of an entrepreneur and starting up, those types of things. But at the end of each session, I'm going to be around for 15 minutes. And if you have any specific questions you want to ask about being an entrepreneur, I've been an entrepreneur for 25 years. Feel free just to shoot those at me, even though they're not specifically related to the "Are you an entrepreneur?" part. Finally, just bringing up the word at the top of the screen there, which is one of the reasons I'm here tonight. I have a process of carving up my time, and I give away 10% of my time as what I call contribution. And contribution, I think, is really important. If the people in the room haven't done any entrepreneurship yet, I would like to encourage you to consider this word as one of the most important parts of being an entrepreneur. The most successful entrepreneurs I know spend a lot of time and energy helping other folks. And they help them in lots of different ways. The way I like to help is I really enjoy working with folks like you. And I like to talk about entrepreneurship and mentor. As you noted, I'm involved in 4 of the top 10 MBA programs in the world on entrepreneurship. I just love talking about it, although I'll try and keep it brief tonight. And contribution for me is part of a process which I think is really critical to the thought process of starting a business. I think if you start a business by thinking about others, about trying to help other people, giving to other people, like you will be doing, by the way. If anybody bought a copy of this book, as I said, all the profits go to the Grameen Foundation, which is a really great nonprofit, which helps a lot of other entrepreneurs around the world. What I've found, and this is just a little nugget I'd like to start off with, is that if you do have that attitude from day one when you start a business, you will be insanely more successful than if you're very inwardly focused. If you're thinking about yourself mostly, and by the way, I meet hundreds and hundreds of mentees. I've mentored over 500 MBA students one-on-one, so quite a number. All of those that came to me with, I want to be a millionaire, that were focused on themselves, generally weren't very successful. Those people that had a higher vision, somebody that really wanted to do something, change the world, those are the people I've seen really be successful. So that's my first little tip, and I'm now going to get off and let Marietta tell you a bit more about the course.
Do you want to introduce Arno?
You want me to do that?
Yeah, why not? Where is Arno?
I think Arno's in the back here.
Okay.
I'll pick this up. We just added this, but it was a little bit of feedback that Arno gave us today. Arno already read the book. One of the reasons we thought this was useful to put up, although you probably don't need to read every word he wrote, is that he's one of your colleagues. He read the book, and one of the outcomes that occurred for him was, having read the book, he decided, I think starting out, that he could be an entrepreneur, but having read the book and gone through the processes we're going to share tonight and next week, he decided that his main goal wasn't to be the front person, but to be more of a supportive role, which wasn't where he started out. So part of the process we're going to go through here is to enable you to decide not only if you want to be an entrepreneur, but also the type of role that you might fulfill if you were going to get into a startup. So what Arno concluded simply was his greatest contribution to the ideas that he had was to actually be a facilitator and a partner to others that he might recruit into the company that he was going to found.
Mm-hmm. So, in terms of an overview of what we're going to do, our roadmap for the next 2 sessions, it's pretty personal. And we are inviting you to share only what you feel comfortable with your colleagues, the 1 or 2 people that you partner with to open up and bounce ideas off of. That's your decision, that's your call. That said, we do encourage it. Even if you just use first names only or talk about what points you're comfortable sharing, we encourage you to do that because it will help you thinking out loud, and it'll help you come to a decision, those of you that have not jumped into the entrepreneurial pool, about whether or not you really want to become an entrepreneur or intrapreneur. John and I looked through the applications, if you will, or the questions that came for the workshop, and there's quite a few of you that are represented from outside Stanford. Maybe you're alum, maybe not, maybe other universities, visiting fellows, but you're working in business or industry or even nonprofits, and you're doing skunk-works or entrepreneurial efforts, which we'll describe in a moment, already. Some of you are thinking about doing innovative new business models and markets in your companies. And others are currently academic that are looking to translate their research to merger acquisition, a larger company, or start your own business. So all these are useful questions: where you've been, where you are now, where you want to go, and how you'll get there, that we will cover in the next 2 sessions. So specifically our objectives, we're going to first help you understand entrepreneurship. Many of you have done it. Some of you could teach this part. It'll be brief. But more importantly, to dive deeper into yourself and think about your skills and talents and how that matches the entrepreneurial or intrapreneurial world. You've probably taken some classes, inventories, skills assessments at the CDC or elsewhere. We want you to take that information and help inform your decisions. And so in the next 2 sessions, you will be doing some homework. You may have to dig out those old personality profiles or assessments in terms of skill assessments that you've done at your companies or organizations. And think about how that translates to you as a founder of your own company or a founder of a new startup within a company. So the first part is more about entrepreneurship and doing a little snapshot where you are now in terms of traits. I'll be curious to see how your EQ, your entrepreneurial quotient quiz, came out. And then part 2, that is next week, same time, same place. We're going to pull it together after you've done about an hour's worth of homework. Hopefully. You get out of it what you put into it. That you will take some of this information and bounce it off of, as I said, your friends, family, colleagues, to get an outside perspective on yourself. And at the end, our objective, John's and my objective, is to help you better answer the question and have more clarity on, are you an entrepreneur or intrapreneur right now? Maybe you need some more information, maybe you need some action items that you're going to do with an action plan, but right now, is it for you? So now we are going to try to pull, I think you have to set it up Cheng, does everybody have their polling devices? Okay, we have to get the software set up, but if you take a look at this, many of you have used these before. Assuming we get it working, we have 10 numbers, 1 through 9, and in the center, 10, the bottom center. We will not be using the bottom two buttons on the left and right hand, respectively. So the first question, if we're ready, is just off the top of your head, walking in the door, how many of you in this room, there you go, think you're entrepreneurial material now? 1, yes. 2, maybe. 3, not so much, like Arno. Go ahead and hit your buttons, please. I think it's slowing down enough. We ready? We need a polling device or it's not working? Okay. Any extras? Any other need an extra? All right, I think we have enough. Let's see what the answers were. Whoa. Okay, then. Almost half of you say, yeah, I think I've got the right stuff. I'm ready to go. I'm fired up. Want to learn more, maybe meet more people, answer a few more questions, but I'm feeling good about this. 2, maybe, in the middle. I'm going to check it out. That's really who this workshop's for, to clarify whether you go to the left or right. And then there's 3, we had how many? Cheng, did this disappear on its own? 8, was it? 8%? Say no. Okay. Now, some of those people may shift over the next week. We look forward to taking this poll again at the very end. So my second question then is, how many of those that did do the entrepreneurial quiz, a 15-minute quiz before arriving tonight, what was your score? If it was 0 to 19, press 1, 20 to 29%, 2, and so on. So please begin polling. Everybody press a button if they're in the 10s, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, if they took the quiz. 80s, 90s, we ready? All right, let's see how we did. Okay, so this is what we suspected, John. We took a guess that maybe most of you are in the 60s or 70s, that you feel pretty confident, most of you on the right-hand side, that you're entrepreneurial in nature or spirit based on this quiz. That is a self-assessment. We did ask you to look outside yourself and work really hard to look at yourself from above, okay? But that said, where's my light? When you put this light on yourself, I'm going to ask you to do that a lot, to study yourself from above, trying to get that third-party perspective. And when you leave, you're going to get perspective from friends, family, colleagues as well. But just now, from a self-reporting point of view, and we know how valid that is, behavioral scientists, this is where we stand. So it's pretty high, leaning towards, yes, I've got the entrepreneurial traits that are likely to be successful. Let's move on. With that, we're going to ask you to get busy. I told you that there's some handouts. I think everybody got one, right? We had enough? All right. And the first sequence of questions we're going to ask you are meant to help you answer that ultimate question. We're going to do it again at the end. And if you have any questions, by the way, in filling this out, you'll see the folks in the red, plus 2 black is here. I don't know what happened to Heijun and Noveline's shirts. Short on T-shirts. Oh, my goodness. Anyway, these folks are members of the leadership team of AIMS, the Association of Industry-Minded Students here, primarily focusing on postdocs and research groups. But, pardon me? Pardon me? Oh, I said it wrong. Stanford Professionals. Thank you. They keep me honest. So they can help you if you have any questions. But we would like you to answer the following 10 questions. John, did you want to set it up?
Can you hear me better now? Nobody could hear me before. Can you hear me better? Okay, great. So what we're hoping here is you got 10 questions and 10 minutes, like a minute, 30 seconds a minute on each one of these. Just write down whatever comes into your head. Please don't take this too seriously. But it is, and most of the things that have been written in this book have been very carefully thought out and worked out with my colleagues, psychologists, and literally tested on hundreds of different entrepreneurs. The benefit of filling this out just quickly is it's going to give you a snapshot now of how you feel, and then right at the very end of the course, we're going to redo this, and we're just going to see what the difference was, how you feel from what you've learned, or if there's anything of value in this process in terms of the development. So, for example, there may be some things in here you're thinking, I don't know the answer to this. That's fine. Just leave it blank. We're just trying to get your immediate and quick thoughts without thinking about it in detail, writing an essay. Many of you will probably have some great answers to these things.
Can you time it for 10 minutes? Let me know. Did you say 10 minutes?
By the way, don't panic if you haven't got an answer to quite a few of these things, because that's what the workshop's about. In the workshop, we're going to go through a lot of these things: personality traits, resources. And all of these little exercises are designed just to get you thinking a little bit. That's it. And hopefully you'll put all these pieces together after the 2 workshops, and it will give you a very clear vision. One of the benefits of this process, by the way, for all of you that have already made their mind up, one way or the other, is that it will hopefully help you focus on some of your career goals. Arno is a perfect example. He went through the process. He learned a lot more about himself at the end of it. We'll share some more of those things that he was prepared to share in the next workshop, when we go through deconstructing you as a person a little bit more. So just do your best to write a line or 2 about how you feel. As we said, this is highly interactive. So one of the things we're going to do as we go along is to try and get the feedback and share with our friends and colleagues that are around and nearby neighbors. How's everybody doing? Everybody's heads are down. Reminds me of school. I apologize for making you work a whole long day and then give you a whole bunch more work to do, but hopefully it's not going to be too hard work. It'll be fun. I think there's some secret mentees in the audience as well. Luckily, hopefully they haven't got their heckling heads on tonight, so we should get through it. I heard some laughter. That's excellent. We're hoping this is going to be fun. We don't want this to be boring. We should have some laughs along the way, at least. It's not too serious. Please don't be too serious about it. By the way, one of the reasons I'm asking you not to be too serious about it is because I want your creative part of your brain to interact here, as well as the more critical piece. It's very important when we work on some of these things that your subconscious mind can help you in part of this process. A lot of the things we're going to be trying to say to you and then leave you with between the sessions, we're trying to open up your subconscious mind and help you get the most out of the process so that when you come back, a lot of that work has been done while you've been away for a week, just in the back of your heads, which is why you don't want to take it too seriously. You're just trying to tease out a few ideas, a few thoughts about yourself, because we will go through the process almost on every single one of these questions to help you answer the question more directly. How are we all doing? I think we've got a few more minutes left.
That's a 2-minute warning.
Yes.
Okay. How are we doing? You done? Yep. All right. So I see some people pulling out iPhones, so that means they're ready. And I'm looking at everybody's faces now. There you go. Okay, good. So at this point, I would like you to share your answers with your neighbor or neighbors if you want to just pair up, and discuss your thoughts and reactions to this preliminary run-through of the ultimate question, do you want to be an entrepreneur? So if you don't have a partner, if you have an extra, there's maybe someone we can have join you. You guys got spaces? You could go 2s or 3s, doesn't matter. 2s or 3s. Okay.
I hope I could record the sound, it's like a blow up.
Are you timing?
Yeah.
Are you timing for 5 minutes?
Yeah. Sorry for funny.
You'll let me know.
Check in.
Are you checking in with your wife?
No, check in my flight.
Oh.
Check in.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Yeah, that's what makes this fun. They get to know people and collaborate. if I err anyway, I'd like to give an extra minute or two, because this is when they get...
Okay, everyone. Sorry to spoil the fun, but we've got to keep going, otherwise we'll be here at 9 o'clock, because we're running a little behind schedule now. So, Marietta?
Okay, we will have lots of times to re-engage. If I have my way. No, just kidding. Okay, so we would like you to share some of your answers to these things that are comfortable with your party you just been chatting with. Oh, you can hear me, that's good. Thank you, Arno. We would like you to share the answers you feel comfortable with and tell me what you thought. What did you learn from doing it yourself or bouncing it off of your neighbor? Were they different? Were they the same? We're going to have you keep this and do it again at the end. And those of you that just arrived, you may want to spend a little bit more time on it. But I'd be interested in any feedback from the exercise or any questions, issues, concerns.
It was very valuable to hear somebody else's perspective, even on themselves, because it makes me think of all kinds of things that may or may not be applicable, but I didn't think of the first time through.
Mm-hmm. So you have to go back, sharpen your pencil a little bit, and maybe answer it more thoroughly or add some more. Perhaps, Ryan, is that right?
Yep.
Okay, good. Other comments, observations? What specifically did you find that you didn't think about? I'm curious.
I think that some of the characteristics sharing with successful entrepreneurs was one where I definitely came in thinking I only have a rough sense of what some of those characteristics might be.
Mm-hmm.
So that was definitely one where I thought about things that I hadn't even touched on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that sort of went throughout a lot of it. And also what your day would be like on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm.
There's areas of your life that I wasn't really thinking about, like what you're dreaming about or how you're occupied when you're not at work.
Mm-hmm. Did you find any contrast when you talked to your partner? People found that they had different perspectives from their families and friends or what they thought the day-to-day life was about? Any surprises? Yes.
Well, a little bit of contrast between me and Eric was that he's an engineer, postdoc,
Mm-hmm.
so maybe doesn't know enough about the business world or how to relate with a business partner.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I come from a business background and sort of have the opposite problem. I'm going to be able to find a technical, maybe person to work with that I can trust, that I can share my vision with, despite the difference in backgrounds.
Mm-hmm. Kind of a symbiotic relationship, it sounds like, the two of you, in terms of what your needs are, your personality traits. Maybe they are complementary. That's exactly what we're going to be talking about in terms of complementing your own areas needing development. So please hang on to these. Keep writing on it if you'd like. And then we'll do it again after you go through all the exercises this week. Now I'm going to ask John to delve into his definition of entrepreneur. And of course, he picked Richard Branson, his fellow countryman.
No bias.
No bias. In fact, I just saw this man take out his iPhone and check on his, was it Virgin? Flights for 5 a.m. tomorrow morning, I believe you're leaving. Okay, so let's just have a common vocabulary here. We all know what we think an entrepreneur is, but let's just use the common approach here. Go ahead, John.
Before I just talk about entrepreneur, one of the great reasons for sharing some of these ideas and the process we're going through is, and I don't know whether Andrew would be happy for me to mention that he's one of my mentees, but whenever I work with teams that are getting serious about starting up, one of the first exercises I do is something similar to this. What we're trying to find out is if we can build teammates together, or put a team together from different varying backgrounds and skill sets that will be complementary. So you don't necessarily want to build a startup with 3 engineers in it. You might want to start up with a person that's very confident, that would be the front person. You might want a highly technical person. You might need somebody that's very good with finance. It depends on the type of startup that you're thinking about. But one of the great things about this process is that usually when these folks get together, they don't go through any of that. They could have met in any number of places, but they don't necessarily really deeply know, as far as one can in a short time, about the motivations and the backgrounds and all of those pieces that go to building a startup. And one of the reasons I developed this was because I've done a lot of startups. And when I first started doing them, I never ever thought about that. And what I found was sometimes when I was working in a team, after working together under stressful conditions, eating ramen soup for a year or two, I didn't really like these folks very much. I mean, we all started out with this dream, and then we realized, oops, your dream is over here, and my dream is over here. Now, one of the benefits of just doing a little bit of this stuff is you wouldn't necessarily get this out if you had you were trying to meet a business partner on a startup and make them fill the form in. They probably think you're a bit crazy. But you can have that in the back of your mind, and you can be asking those questions. And most importantly, you in the room, if you go through these exercises and follow through, you will really deeply, completely understand your motivations by the end of this course. I promise you that. That is one of the main reasons for being here. And you can share some of that with people, and it will make you a much stronger founder team from day one. Strong founder teams are the ones that get funded. Anybody wants to do a startup? It's about a strong team. It's not like one person turning up and trying to get funded. It's not going to happen, generally. It's usually about a team that's on fire, working together towards a goal that's very well suited to each other. Okay, so that's one of the reasons it's beneficial to do that. So hopefully that will give you a motivation, but keep filling the forms in. Okay, most of the people in this room, I'm sure, understand what an entrepreneur is. We are not trying to teach you to suck eggs here. But what we do want to say is that there are different flavors of entrepreneur. We call them intrapreneurs, and social entrepreneurs. They have different motivations. But the essence of an entrepreneur, just to be clear from our perspective, is not an inventor. An inventor is not an entrepreneur, okay? So a lot of people that are very, very skilled technically sometimes think that that's enough. And an entrepreneur, generally speaking, is somebody that is also extremely good at leadership, motivation, getting funding, and building a team around a basic invention or idea or innovation, okay? So an entrepreneur has more skills than just a basic inventor. And generally speaking, they also are prepared to take a risk. An entrepreneur, generally speaking, has to take a risk. So just for clarity, that's what we mean by an entrepreneur, and I apologize. There are some pictures of people that aren't English, you know, but there's so few English entrepreneurs, I have to choose one of them. So. One of the other things that I speak about quite a bit when I'm working with my mentees is focusing very early on your dream. So part of this course is a little bit, you know, like, what's this got to do with it? I mean, the dream to me, honestly, is one of the most critical pieces of success for entrepreneurs. People that just wake up in the morning and want to make money generally are not very successful entrepreneurs. The ones that make the real money, the ones that are generally very successful, have a big dream, a big, big dream. They want to change the world in some way. They want to be able to do something very positive for humanity. Often, I'm sure a lot of people in this room have amazing skills and capabilities. And if all that was, the full force of this room was brought to bear on the world, some amazing things would happen. So one of the things I encourage you to do while you're doing this, when we ask you to think about dreams, is don't be scared to think crazy, crazy dreams, crazy stuff, big stuff. Don't do small stuff, please. Okay? None of my mentees are allowed to come up with small ideas. If they come to me with a small idea, we all agree to tear it up, throw it away, and start again. Okay, so very important to think of big ideas. And I think you could probably read Mr. Bernard Shaw's point, but the most important thing, I think, is about big ideas are the things that generally have the most impact on the world. So if you go back to contribution, and big ideas are the ones that get funded. So if anybody here wants to do a startup or is doing a startup, big ideas are the things that motivate people. I'm an angel investor. If you show me a little idea that's going to turn over $5 million, I'm not going to give you any of my money. Show me an idea that'll do $500 million, now you're talking. So big is important for lots of reasons, especially here in Silicon Valley. If you're not in Silicon Valley, big is less important. But if you want to get any attention, you've got to think big. Part of the question we've got to try and deal with today also is about whether you, when you get down to it, want to be an entrepreneur or not, whether you can be or not. A lot of people get told they cannot be an entrepreneur because some people believe, and I disagree with this particular point, and Mr. Drucker here is with me, they say that entrepreneurs are only born. They're not made. You can't make an entrepreneur. Well, my belief is that entrepreneurship is teachable. I guess I'd be crazy because I've been teaching it for 15 years now if I didn't believe that. But hey, that's my own personal view and the view of many people I work with. So don't be dispirited if anybody has given you the notion that you can only be born into being an entrepreneur. Some people are natural entrepreneurs. I started being an entrepreneur when I was 17. So I guess I'm more of a natural entrepreneur. But the people I have the most respect for, the people that I've seen be incredibly successful, have built up the skills and the knowledge over time. Okay, so I do believe genuinely it is entirely possible to learn and develop the skills as an entrepreneur. But one of the greatest things you're going to learn from this course, and this is really a very important lesson in my opinion, is what are my strengths? What are the things I'm really good at? You may have a really amazing dream, but you may find that you are very specifically suited to a particular role within the team that you might want to create to fulfill your dream. And that's a really critical part of success. In other words, if you don't understand your own capabilities, if you're not really clear on what you're really good at, then it's really hard to find teammates to come along and to complement you, right? And you want a really solid team if you're going to be successful as an entrepreneur. And multiple teams. I've studied a lot of startups. Every single startup, I've generally kept some of the team members I started off with, the ones that were, in my opinion, the best, and I brought them along, startup after startup after startup. And one of those benefits, of course, is that we can almost read each other's thoughts, and we can do things much more effectively. And when we're trying to raise money, which I do regularly, it's a hell of a lot easier when that team is well put together. Okay. I'm going to do a little bit more talking, but we are going to try and break this up. Otherwise, I know you're all going to fall asleep. It's 6:52. Everybody's hungry and tired, and so.
I'll take care of if they fall asleep, John. We'll cut through that.
So we're going to go through a number of the traits. So that was brought up by a number of folks here. So I mentioned I'm an entrepreneur. I also mentioned that I'm an angel investor. And most of my colleagues in the angel groups I'm in are looking for a lot of these things that are on this board when they're looking for people standing up in front of them, okay? So with all the entrepreneurs I know and most of the mentees that I've had over time, these are the things that we try and emphasize. These are organized, in my opinion, in order of importance. So this is the most important skill. And I like this quote so much that Marietta said I had to read it. So I'm going to read it because otherwise you're going to read it and then you won't listen to what I'm saying. Nothing in the world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent. Read women when we say men, please. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination are omnipotent. I genuinely believe that. The people I have seen that have been the most successful in the 25 years I've been doing this just won't give up. They just will not give up. And I had a picture of Steve on the previous slide because to me, he is the epitome of somebody that would not give up on his dream. They kicked him out of his company, one of the most successful companies of all time, the first time around, kicked him out. But he wouldn't lay down. He came back, and he, obviously made it pretty well to one of the most successful startups, if you will, ever, as far as I'm concerned. So I think persistence is really important. If you don't feel like you are persistent, please, please, please do not become an entrepreneur. You will be miserable, absolutely miserable. It is so hard to do. Okay, I got that point across, I'm hoping. Confidence. Well, this is one where a lot of people, and I count myself, and you won't believe this probably, but I count myself amongst the introverts in the room. I think until I was about 16, I was scared to go out of the house. It took a lot, and honestly, I'm not that great in front of crowds. I really have to sort of get myself going. I don't know if anybody else in the room sort of feels a bit like that. And confidence is something that I've had to develop. I've developed confidence. Confidence came about through watching myself succeed at some things and fail at other things, but still feel good about myself on the things that I succeeded in. And when I'm in a room with people, I often say, hey, wow, you're really confident. And I'm thinking, I don't feel very confident. But part of it that you should know is that if you're ever going to raise funding or you're ever going to raise a team, you're ever going to be able to try and get people behind your dream, you've got to get revved up enough. And I'm passionate enough about entrepreneurship to seem like I'm confident. And that's almost enough. So confidence is really critical in success in almost every part of the venture. Now, that's not just necessarily you. That could be your teammates. That could be other elements of the team. But you want to make sure when you're standing up and doing a pitch of your idea or you're trying to sell a customer that you have developed behind something that you're really passionate about. And so confidence, in a sense, is driven by passion, which we'll come on to. This is one of my favorite things that people very rarely think about. But if you imagine a lot of the incredible inventions, and I suspect people in this room have got some amazing ideas and innovations in their minds for what they would like to do if they're thinking of being an entrepreneur. If you don't have the vision to say, well, here's an old business model that's broken, I'm going to fix it. Here is a way of, say, treating patients, I'm going to fix it. Here is a drug that's not working effectively, I think I can do better. If you don't have the vision to be able to look to the future and say, okay, I think I can do better. I think I've got a dream that, whilst I can't see exactly how I'm going to implement that dream, I'm prepared to look to the future and see what that might look like. It's really important to have a vision, and most successful entrepreneurs don't necessarily know how to get to the end point, but they have some idea of what their future goals and dreams will look like. That's the vision, and they'll aim to that, and they'll probably go like this to get there, but they've always got that vision, and that makes them stand out from other people who want the status quo, okay? So vision's really, really important. Another long quote, and I guess I better read this one as well, otherwise you'll all read it. Hatching an idea is only the beginning of the battle. Don't make the mistake of imagining that an idea, no matter how good, can win its way in the world unless you have grit enough, backbone enough, enthusiasm enough to get behind it and push it with all your might. I guess most of you know who Mr. Forbes is. He's quite an entrepreneur himself. But honestly, in all the mentees I see hundreds and hundreds of startups every year. Most of them don't have enough of this, right? They come and tell me about their idea, and I go, well, what have you done about it? Well, it's just an idea. I say, well, what have you done about it? Show me what you've done. I want to see something you've done. One of the most important things about this process, if we can get you fired up and think you really got an idea and you want to do something about it, is go out and do something, anything. Just get something moving. You know, movement is life. So all of this, all the previous points are really totally useless if you're not prepared to act on your idea. Even if it's a small first step, then you've got to follow through. I can tell you, I've had enormous numbers of ideas pitched at me, and then what does anybody do about it? Nothing. That's where 99% of all dreams end up, nowhere, because nobody's prepared to do the work. Okay. I know a lot of these are going to sound really obvious, but it's worth going through each of them because these, in my opinion, are the critical things. You'll notice I didn't so far have on my list something that you probably don't have. Most people in this room could easily do most of these traits, right? And even if it's like confidence, where you have to sort of work up the confidence, it doesn't mean that you can't learn how to do it or get better at it. I think I'm an example of that. So dedication is a perfect example. Everybody can be dedicated, but entrepreneurship is well beyond anything, if you haven't done it before, you can possibly imagine in terms of commitment. It's like 1,000% commitment. You cannot succeed as an entrepreneur unless you are absolutely, completely and utterly dedicated. And some people even say nuts. You've got to be almost crazy with your idea to make it work. It is so hard to do, in my opinion. And dedication, I'd like to develop the idea of passion a little bit more, because if you're not so totally and utterly passionate about it, then it's very hard to bring a whole bunch of other people behind it, because you need everybody to be dedicated, not just you, okay? So dedication is a really critical point. So to that end, I'm going to shut up for a minute and see if I can get the video to work. And we'll hear a little bit more about one of my favorite people, Steve, here. And let's see what he said about this. If I can get the mouse to get to the...
You have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing.
Hear that?
And it's totally true. And the reason is is because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. It's really hard, and you have to do it over a sustained period of time. So if you don't love it, if you're not having fun doing it and you don't really love it, you're going to give up. And that's what happens to most people, actually. If you really look at the ones that ended up being successful, unquote, in the eyes of society and the ones that didn't, oftentimes it's the ones that are successful loved what they did so they could persevere when it got really tough. And the ones that didn't love it quit because they're sane, right? Who would want to put up with this stuff if you don't love it? So it's a lot of hard work, and it's a lot of worrying constantly. And if you don't love it, you're going to fail. So you got to love it. You got to have passion.
So that's part of the equation. Passion is part of the equation. Dedication is part of the equation. I couldn't have said it better myself, but obviously you'll probably recognize him a lot more than you recognize me, so hopefully you'll believe what he said. Here's another one that is really brought up, but I find certainly in almost every single startup I do, there is a point when I have to take a leap of faith. There's usually a point where I'm about to run out of money. All my staff have left. The ship is sinking. There is something wrong. There's some incredible technical screw-up, or some emergency has occurred in the life of a startup. And oftentimes there is this totally illogical requirement to take a leap of faith in order for your dream and for your business to be successful. And it's not something that you can tangibly measure. You can't say, well, there's a 73.2% chance of success, so I'm going to make this decision. It's something usually where you don't specifically have data that you can make a decision on. You have to have this deep-rooted faith in your dream and your idea in order to be able to push it just that one extra day, or to be able to sweat the creditors for that little bit of extra time to keep your business on the rails. But I can tell you it will happen again and again. If you ever do a startup, or if you've done them, you'll probably have the feeling at some point where you're about to give up and something inside you makes you think, I've got to give this another shot. I've got to keep going at it. I know it doesn't make any sense, but I've got to do it. It's called a leap of faith. Quote after quote after quote. I don't know. My publisher told me I had to have a quote in every paragraph. So, again, integrity is another one of those weird things that a lot of people perhaps don't associate with business folks and with entrepreneurs. And honestly, I hate a lot of these media shows where all these people have to screw each other to win the show. And real life isn't like that. I'm sure for most people in the room, you don't really get very far if you're that type of person. You're just, treading on the person below you to get to the top of the ladder. And entrepreneurship is actually a really big team game. It doesn't feel like it. Most of the media don't make it sound like it. Most of the folks that get all the praise, the Richard Bransons and the Steve Jobs, they may look like these heads of organizations, and sometimes they do things and say things which I think are not necessarily living up to this. But I can tell you, if you are not looking after your team, if you're not putting other people first, if you are not being reasonable with your customers and your suppliers, you will fail. You absolutely will. Integrity is so important. And the problem with a startup is there's lots of opportunity to do just a little, we'll just do it that way. Or, we'll cut a few corners over here. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's better to be somebody and stick with your own principles. And this is a very important point for startups because those principles will get tested. In my opinion, it's important to stick with what you believe, no matter what.
What type of mistakes are there?
So there's a fine line. There's a fine line between chutzpah, which is a fabulous Jewish word that relates, I think, to having the confidence to encourage people to, let's say, if it was a startup, to be your first customer, or you slightly oversell them. There's a difference between that and outright lying, right? So unfortunately, some people take the opportunity to build websites and steal other people's content and make up capabilities that they don't necessarily have. And so there's a fine line between being in an alpha or beta of a product and not having any product at all. As just one example, I'm sure you can think of very many. There's a lot of people who take the opportunity to mislead other people, and I think that's dangerous. I think you have to be very careful about the people you bring into your dream. It's very easy to mislead that team, that first team that you might take on, not give them all the facts. So I think transparency is really important. That's really what I'm trying to emphasize. I don't know whether I'm one of the oldest people in the room or not, but when I was a kid, I really liked Bruce Lee. I thought he was great. And I failed completely to look like him, as you can see, but nevertheless, I thought he was awesome. And one of the things that he did that I thought was amazing as a kid was he studied lots of different types of martial arts. And he had the capability to take a little bit from each of the different martial arts that he had learned, and he put them together in his own system. And that system became a very widely taught means of martial arts. And the point that he's making here is about adaptability. And it's really, really difficult for a lot of folks to be incredibly flexible when working and making a change from perhaps their corporate job to being an entrepreneur. Because when you're in a corporate world, generally there's lots of rules. And there's train tracks to go down, and there's people at your back to tell you, hey, you went the wrong way. When you're an entrepreneur, that all goes out the window. So that's why you have to have a lot of these other traits. But adaptability is one of the most important ones, and where a lot of the people I work with that are highly technical, I work with a lot of engineers, they really, really struggle with this. They have a point of view. And that point of view, it doesn't matter that you're now in a different environment than you were when you're in a big company or in this little company. So adaptability is really, really important. You have to be extremely flexible. And the most important thing is you have to be very responsive to your customer. So I see a huge number of business plans where people write things, they have ideas, and they think, this is it, this is going to be awesome. And then we show it to a customer, the customer goes, yeah. So what? I don't, or they're not going to buy it, or whatever reason. There's usually a long list of reasons why there's a problem. Those folks won't change. They will not change their product. I love my product. My product's the greatest. I invented this thing. It's my baby. I'm not going to touch it. It's perfect. The customer's wrong. We'll find a different customer. They usually die, those companies. You've got to be prepared to be exceptionally flexible, especially in the face of the customer. This one's probably pretty obvious. Here we go. Thank you. Not much to be said about this. I'm letting you read the quote. It's clear that being an entrepreneur is a really, really tough gig. And particularly if you are the startup founder, you will find that everybody will be relying on you. So if you come from a corporate job, there's all this infrastructure and there's all the support mechanisms. When you become a CEO of a startup, everything is on you. Everything. The finances, the people, people's dreams. You've got to have a lot of courage to be able to go through with this, because you are taking on something much bigger than yourself if you do a startup. So you must be prepared to be incredibly courageous from day one and to be able to be up for pushing the absolute limits of your fear. So, for example, I am afraid of public speaking. You don't believe that, do you? But I have to really, really work hard on this particular skill. Why? Because I'm an entrepreneur. That's what I do. I have 2 startups. And I am constantly in front of a whole bunch of folks. And I can't get away from it. I can't run and hide. I can't get somebody else to stand up. They wouldn't take me seriously. You're the guy that started the company. Well, you've got to stand up and do it. So I find myself having to really draw on a lot of courage to deal with my personal fears. I'm an introvert. If my dad was stood next to me, he would be, well, he'd be hiding in a corner. He's super introvert, super introvert. So the point I'm trying to make is, in this process, I'm coming up to the last one, of working together, I want you to be honest, okay? I want you to be thinking about these things, and I want you to say, okay, I know I've got to do this. Am I up for it? You know, can I face my fears and do it anyway, okay? Because it's going to be a really important part of a decision if you're going to be an entrepreneur, to be able to step up. Last one. This is Marietta's speciality. So I told you I wasn't very good at this and that she's the expert. She should really be doing this. I should be sitting at the side. But clearly, you need to be able to communicate. Now, most of the engineers I know are really bad at this. What's really great about this process is that it enables you to figure out that you are not so good at it and learn skills. I had to go on training courses to stand up and not have my knees knocked together in front of you folks. And there's a lot of you, so that's quite scary. So I think you need to be clear that communication is everything. You cannot get funded if you cannot communicate. You cannot get the most important thing you're going to need as a startup, and that's a team of highly committed, incredible folks to work with you if you cannot effectively communicate your dream to them. And you cannot get that first customer. You must be able to communicate. So, seems like I've been speaking long enough. I'll open up the floor to some questions. And do we have mics anywhere? So, you just have to shout. We'll start at the back and work forwards. Go ahead. Curious what my two startups are. Okay, I didn't come to talk about me, but I'll give you 10 seconds, and then you can ask me later if you like. I have a software startup that's in the software licensing space, and I have a tablet startup that's making hardware security and mounting systems for tablet computers. Any more questions?
Do you think it's fair to differentiate between financial risk and financial volatility for an entrepreneur?
The question is it fair to differentiate between financial risk and volatility?
Yeah, permanent loss of capital versus simply uncertainty.
Okay, so that's a difficult question to answer because it's very specific. What I would say is, and what I do say is, that if you're going to do a startup, let's just say it was you for a second and you had a plan, two things are important. We're going to work through this process of trying to understand who we are and where we are in time. And one of the reasons we say, do you want to be an entrepreneur now, is that circumstances can change. So one of the two questions I always ask folks, particularly friends, when they ask me, should I do a startup? First one on financial risk is, can you take the risk? So, for example, if you are going to invest some of your own money, can you afford to lose it? And I think the second bit about volatility, if I understand the context. Yeah.
You kind of answered it already.
Yeah.
If you take a risk that you can afford to take, then that really is the risk. Because you're already bounding your range of what can happen.
Yeah. So, but what I was going to try and pick up, I'm bending your question to make a point on volatility is, no matter what you think on the first point, if you thought that you needed X dollars and that was your life savings, multiply by 5. Think of volatility, you know, how long's my life savings going to last to do this startup of mine? You know, can I risk it? How long will I risk it for? The other thing I ask people to do if they're working in a corporate gig is to have a year's worth of money in the bank. If you can. These are friends of mine, you know, not necessarily people that are doing startups and raising venture or raising angel money. Lady in the back there that's got the mic.
Hello. Have you been in a situation where you had difficulty distinguishing between somebody's persistence and stubbornness, which is lack of adaptability? Because I see a kind of tension between.
Mm-hmm. So, stubbornness and persistence and adaptability. So I'll do the stubbornness part. I think there is a fine line between stubbornness and persistence. And to a certain extent, it's very defined by the type of startup you're doing, if that's the environment we're talking about for a second. Because, for example, if you're venture capital backed, then one of the good things about venture is that it helps define the boundaries of success and failure. In other words, you will pitch the venture capitalist. If you're lucky, they will fund you, and they will give you milestones, and those milestones have to be achieved in order for you to have success. Otherwise, they will kill your startup stone dead. If you're in a lifestyle business or somewhere in between, like an angel-funded business, then generally those lines are slightly blurred. So you can sort of keep going at your idea maybe with less definition of persistence and stubbornness. So for example, if you're VC-backed, you can't be stubborn, right? It's not possible. These are the rules. If you don't do this, you're dead. If, on the other hand, you're self-funding it, let's say, for example, you were going to do that, you can kid yourself, right? Which is, I think, the point you're saying. You can like kid yourself along, well, you know, I'll keep going, I'll keep going. I think you have to be clear as far as you can with a startup what your objectives are and what the rules are for engaging personally and for the rest of the team. And you need to give it your best shot, but you don't want to go beyond your best shot where you're making your life a complete misery, or you give away, you know, all of your assets and that you weren't prepared to step up for that, or you're dragging down a whole team of other folks with you. So you've got to know when enough is enough. But on the other hand, what generally happens, and I can't remember the exact quote, but I think they say almost all sort of huge endeavors in life fail 2 inches from the goal. So it's a personal feeling, I think, to a certain extent about, are you being too stubborn? I mean, are you on a losing streak? My final point about that is I work with a lot of, as I said, startups. And generally, one of the great things is if you're a startup, you should find a mentor. I'm a mentor. There are a lot of great mentors in the Valley. They will help you with that perspective. They think you're being a stubborn so-and-so. Generally, they'll tell you. And it's nice to have a third-party experience perspective on things. So I would, you know, use that if it's not a venture type scenario, but if you do get angel funded, often you'll find you get a mentor and they'll say, give it up. It ain't worth it.
So my question is about your point on dedication.
Yeah.
So I believe that's a really great point. It means you can't be dedicated to other things. So I'm thinking dedication means no work-life balance. There's no balance whatsoever. Help your friends, family, that kind of thing.
That's a great thing. And in fact, we do have a point on that. So I'll just answer it very quickly and then we'll cover it again in a second. But I think, and I don't want to get all psychological and NLP on you, but I do think that in order to be successful, you generally have to be, as far as you can, reasonably balanced. The reason I say that is when you do a startup, basically you're a crazy person. I mean, you're just going generally hell for leather, working really, really hard. And often a lot of things do get pushed and can get pushed out of balance, but generally for a period of time. So there's a difference between the people that are maniacs, that, you know, are totally focused on one point in their life and the rest of it falls to pieces, and those people that are more balanced. But for example, in my own case, whenever I do a startup and I have a wife and 2 kids, I'll go with my wife and I'll explain to her, look, this is the crazy idea I got this week. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. This is how I'm thinking it's going to go, because I've done a lot of startups. So I share that experience. Because I'm an experienced entrepreneur, I know, for example, that if I let my health go, which I have done in the past, if I work too hard, although I'm getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning after tonight, that will have a toll on me. What I generally am trying to do in terms of think about it, though, the context I'm thinking about it is performance, right? It's actually crazy to put all those things out of your mind, because your performance will actually be worse, right? If you don't have balance, if you don't deal with your family, you know, if religion's important to you, for example, you don't look after that part of your life, you don't have friends and people to sort of get over the stress, you don't exercise, it can be very problematic because your performance will be significantly impacted. Does that answer the question? Mostly. I've got more. I've been given that sign.
Well, I'm looking at our time. I know they could spend the rest of the time asking you questions, but I also know you'll be here afterwards. All right, so I'm going to pull the cord on that and ask you to get busy evaluating yourself. So if you open up your packet, once again, you'll see that there's a list of the 10 traits that John went through, and you asked a few clarifying questions. And we're asking you to rank yourself on each one of these traits, 1 through 5. 5 being a strong match to you, 4 pretty high, 3 about neutral, 1s and 2, of course, being least like you at this time. Then you can transcribe it on the following sheet into the 3 categories, the buckets: least, more like you, strong match. We gave you an example with Jane on the following page. While you're doing that, Hejun has a brief announcement about the signups.
Right. I know the signups went around once. Yeah.
The sign-up sheet went around once, but I think it sort of went through holes. So I'll circulate it again. It's really important that we have your signatures. And
Not in alphabetical order, sorry, but if you could please find your names and sign. And also, if you don't find your name, you can also let us add it at the end of the sheet. So I'll circulate it while you're there. Okay, great.
So how are we doing, everyone? This is only meant to take a few seconds. You're meant to go straight down the list as fast as possible. Most people done?
Oh.
Okay, I'm going to keep going.
I did want to point out that when you do have a few more moments, that at the bottom of the page there, if you transcribe those traits that are strong matches, more like you, least like you, that there's a space for you to make some insights, some observations. What are areas that you might work on that are less strong? What might you do as a plan to complement those skills? Maybe it's someone you hire, or more research or reading or skill bidding classes. So you can complement or develop those skills, or maybe not. So if you have any quick thoughts, jot those down before we add a few more that I encourage John to share.
Okay, looks like most people are done, so we'll push on a little bit. We were going to have you share. Oh, you have a question? Oh.
Okay. Any questions on the questionnaire, 1 through 5 traits? High, medium, low match? Did everybody get a chance to at least quickly go through and self-assess? Anybody did not?
Okay. We're trying to keep to time as much as we can, so we're going to keep pressing on. So we dealt with a bunch of things which we call traits, but I do believe there's a whole raft of other qualities, and we're only going to cover a few of them, that a successful entrepreneur tends to have. The first of those, and these are not in any particular order, are they like to bend the rules. In fact, there are a number of TV shows where they had entrepreneurs playing the game, and they took some people that weren't entrepreneurs, put the entrepreneurs in, and the entrepreneurs are always the ones that were cheating. Now, I know I said about integrity and all that stuff, and this is only a game show, so nobody's going to die. But what I mean by bend the rules is not break the rules, but bend the rules. So, for example, in my startup, I have a number of people that work for very large corporate companies, and they've never been in a startup before. And I say to them, I think that we need to get a better price. We're buying something, right? And they're like, well, no, this is the price. They're a big company. They'll never give us a better price than this because we only bought X amount of dollars worth. And I said, no, we need a better price. But no, you can't do that. They don't give a better price. Well, okay, let me call them up. Cut a long story short, you have to be able to, and so I call them up and I get a discount. You have to be able to think outside the rules. Often you are brought up to think that these things have to be done this way. One of the massive benefits of being an entrepreneur is you can break all the rules, or bend them, sorry. Break all the preconceptions of rules, let's put it that way. So you can live your life how you want to live it. It's really, really critical that you can at least operate when you're competing with others in a fashion where you don't feel constrained by the old IBM syndrome where I can't do this and I can't do that, okay? I assume everybody in the room's heard this word bootstrap before. Does anybody not know what bootstrap means? Okay, so it's a few people. So bootstrap is just sort of a bit of jargon that relates to trying to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I think it must have come from the 1930s or something. But the general idea is be very conservative with the way you spend money. So for example, one of the biggest problems venture capital-backed startups have is they get a lot of money. They don't get a corporate culture and discipline which says, I need to be very, very careful how I spend my money. Spending money is really, really easy. Spending money wisely is extremely difficult. By wisely, what I mean is, it's no good not spending any money. If you need something, you need to invest your money in getting it. But on the other hand, if you do not need to spend the money, don't do it. Again, I see this again and again. Somebody comes from the corporate world. When they were in a big corporation, they had a big fancy office, and it was big, expensive Aeron chairs, and boom, bang goes, a big chunk of their investment money. So one of the great things about bootstrapping is that you run on as lean and sensible budget as possible. And the reason you do that is if you can run lean, you can run longer. And if you can run longer, you can generally last longer than your competition. And if you're in a venture capital-backed startup, I guarantee there'll be 2 or 3 people doing exactly the same thing as you. That's just the way it seems to go. So if you are clever with your money and careful with it and prudent with it, then you will be able to outlast your competition. On the other hand, don't hold back and spend the money where you need to spend it. That's what bootstrapping means. Can you take on the big guys? So personally, one of the things I love about startups is I get to take on the big guys. Now, a lot of people don't do startups because they're afraid that there's this massive corporation that owns the whole market and it'll be impossible to beat them, right? And that's just another one of those rules that's in your head, okay? And I suspect nobody in this room feels that way, but I'm just mentioning it. So a lot of people I see are like, well, I don't want to do this idea because somebody else has done it already. And I'm like, well, what's your innovation? And they're like, well, we're 10 times faster, better, cheaper. I'm like, wow, this shouldn't be a problem, right? So one of the great things about startups is they're like a small ship competing with a big ship, or a David and a Goliath. I really enjoy doing startups where you have that capability to innovate and attack the big guys. Okay, so don't be afraid to do that. Those people that are successful entrepreneurs generally are happy to compete. Oh, didn't mean to do that. I think we went through this before, so I don't need to overemphasize it, but customer reality is the only reality, right? An enormous number of people, technical people, do get hung up on their idea. Don't get hung up on your idea. Do be prepared to change your idea to match customer feedback, to match the reality in which you're trying to sell your product. Or if you're still a very early stage startup, then maybe you need to change other things about the way that your product is being brought to market. Maybe you need to address a different type of customer, or maybe you need a different price point or a different mechanism for addressing the market, but do be flexible based on feedback from the customer. And finally, my head's not in the way. probably the most important thing I notice is you've got to be able to be knocked down and get back up again. Almost every single startup gets no, 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 no as the answer to all their questions. Can I have some money? No. Will you be my customer? No. Will you help me? No. Will you give me resources? No, I will not. So what you have to be able to do is to consistently come back around and keep asking the question. You get all sorts of problems when you're an entrepreneur, and you have to be able to tunnel under them, round them, go over them, and that's where the passion and those other things come in. It's really important that you feel that way in order to be able to get through them. There's a question. Shoot. Yeah.
I hear every time grow fast.
Good point. So
you know, I understand this in a smart way. Or already, I don't know, restaurant.
A good question. Yeah. So when do you bootstrap? When do you pour in the gas? In fact, frankly, I think almost the definition for venture capital is that's when you pour in the gas, right? I mean, so as an angel investor or as a startup entrepreneur, the time I would go and raise VC would be when I felt that my idea was getting some traction and now I needed to hire a big team, or in your case, you were suggesting, as an example, you came up with a great restaurant concept, and how would you then franchise it or roll it out? I think that is a really clear tipping point usually. So bootstrapping is, and the lean mentality is not necessarily for the entire life of the business, right? And we're just talking about, shall I be an entrepreneur at this point? But if you do a startup, generally the early days are the times when you want to be bootstrapped. What you're trying to do is to get customer market fit, to quote my friend Steve Blank's theory. And once you have customer market fit, then you get some form of traction with customers. Then you get a very strong feeling as a management team, hey, yeah, I think we're onto something here. That's the time, perhaps, that you throw the gas in the tank and really hit the accelerator. So getting knocked down and getting back up again, it's pretty obvious, but I just want to emphasize that most of the people that come to me that don't know anything about entrepreneurship do not take this seriously enough. I mean, we've heard Steve Jobs talk about it, but it is serious. It wrecks people's lives if they take this on without realizing that they're really going to have to take a knocking. Now, a lot of people don't like hearing no. A lot of people do not like being rejected. If you don't like being rejected, either get a different front person that's happy to be rejected, or don't do it. Okay? Mm-hmm. I'll open it up now just for a few more questions. Anybody else got a question? Yeah. So the question was, if somebody's really, I'll paraphrase you, on fire, really passionate about their vision, they find taking a no easier. Is that roughly what you mean? Absolutely. Absolutely. There's something about people, it doesn't matter whether they're running this amazing, Silicon Valley startup that's in software or social web or whatever it is, or any other form of business. You know those people when you meet them, the passionate people. They just seem to be able to get through anything. And so that's why I put that quote up, the video up. It's just something innate when you are totally focused. And this is a really great question, because this is what this workshop is trying to achieve. We're trying to help you really find inside yourselves, and that's what the next part of the workshop is all about, yourselves more than entrepreneurship. The thing that really gets that, right? That thing that really gets you out of bed every morning. And that is a great, you hear that, get out, what makes you get out of bed in the morning? I think that's the answer, right? If you're passionate, it doesn't matter how sick you are, it doesn't matter what beset you yesterday, you just wake up the next day and you've got to keep going at it. It's almost like you're nuts. Certainly my wife has mentioned that to me more than once. But seriously, you do sort of get like that. So I think that you do become, you can take the knocks much more easily just because it almost floats over you. Seriously.
Aside from raw conditions, what are some of the best ways of getting comfort when you get a no, but you don't get a because?
So the way I sometimes teach sales training, and also in building startups, I try and always have an analogy. So the first thing is if you've got a really great vision and you're aiming for it, then the way I describe this is like building a wall. Okay. So if the vision, in order to be achieved, is a complete wall, and you have to keep putting a brick in one by one, every time you get a brick, you feel really great. All you're trying to do is to get through all the no's so that you can get a yes. Every time you get a yes, you reward yourself. You put another brick in the wall. If you're focused on the bricks, like, yeah, I got 5 no's, but I got a yes, I put a brick. I'm one step closer to my vision. That really helps. So I think if you're focused on the right thing, a bit like the passion, but very specifically, that helps you. Somebody else? Okay, good question. So I wasn't 7, I was 17. I really would have been advanced if I'd done it when I was 7.
That's smart.
Lemonade stand when they were 7, so they're ahead of me. But honestly, one of the benefits of me being here, and then what I say to my mentees is, most of the reason that I like mentoring is I have made almost every stupid, idiotic mistake in my life. I have screwed it up so many times. What I'm trying to teach you here is how to stop falling down my dumb holes. So when I was 17, I didn't even think about it. I just happened to love cars. I'm a man, a boy at the time. Happened to love cars. It was my passion, and I just sort of fell into this idea. And there happened to be, at that point in time, an opportunity to import cars into the UK, where I was born, and make a profit. So that's what I did. But I didn't think big. I didn't have this amazing dream. I just woke up one morning and thought, hey, this is a great idea. I'm going to do this. And that's one of the reasons I'm here, right? Because that worked out reasonably well, but it didn't really matter. I was only 17. I've done a number of startups since then where I did not think big enough, right? And I worked with people I didn't really understand, and I didn't really understand myself. And all of those things were problematic in going forward in building a startup. And they caused me enormous amounts of personal pain. And then I found a whole bunch of other people doing exactly the same thing. And I thought, what's the matter with us? Why are we all doing this? Why didn't we think about it before we did it? And often the motivation to do that was very left brain, right brain. So I'd say I trained maybe 300 MBA students before I figured this out. So I get the MBA students who come and see me. They say, I've got this amazing invention. And I go, wow, that's really great. And then I'd say, well, what about your personal circumstances? And what I found was most of them never put the two things together. They never, ever connected. I'll give you one of my favorite stories. I had a guy come to me, and he had this amazing idea for some games on this funny thing called an iPhone. And it was a really great idea. I thought, yes, this is awesome. Okay. And then as we got to the end of the pitch, I said, before I forgot, I said, there's something I've got to ask him. What about, just tell me a bit about you before I go. And he went, well, I've just got married. I'm like, okay. And I'm about to have a baby. My wife's just left work. And I've got this really great mortgage I've just taken on. And I'm like, I'm about to give him my investment money, and this guy's going to implode. So I said, would you take my advice? And he said, well, I'll listen. I said, park the idea for 12 months and come back. Your baby's going to be born in 3 months. Your wife will not like you very much if, A, you stop earning any money because you haven't got any life savings, you haven't got a year set by. And I think she might be a bit annoyed if you don't show up when the baby's born because you're too busy working 18 hours a day on your startup. And he went, oh, yeah. That's happened hundreds of times. And I've done it myself. You just become obsessed with an idea, and you don't think about the rest of you. That's some of the other questions we've dealt with here. So that's what this workshop is about, in essence, is trying to put together those two pieces. Sorry, the guy in the blue at the back there. So in this particular case, it worked really well. Firstly, I think he told his wife about the idea, and they started to talk to each other, which I thought was always good, especially in a marriage that's just been consummated. And then she said, which is a funny part of the story, she said, well, I've got an idea. Why should you do your idea? I want to do my idea. And he went, oh, I didn't know you had an idea. She started up something on Facebook, and she sold it after about 18 months and made a huge amount of money. So he didn't actually, he did his games on the side in the evenings. So that's one way of dealing with it. But he didn't actually ever do that startup. His wife got out there before him, did a Facebook thing, flipped it, and made a ton of money on it, which is a hilarious sort of ending to the story. But you know, I don't think there is a really easy practical answer in 2 seconds before we run out of time to cover that off, other than to say it's really important to communicate with your friends, and this is what we've been asking you to do, and the family and your support system. I think you do need to take an inventory, which is part of your homework of the things that are important to you, and then you just have to make a judgment. I mean, obviously he would have been nuts to do it, but there's a lot of people somewhere in between, right? And I think once you've taken a good hard look at the idea, sort of hopefully seen a few mentors and investors and other folks and got some feedback just dealing with the idea, and then dealt with your family and your personal circumstances, your own ambitions and drives, and I think you bring all those facts to the table, that's when you get the answer. I think you can see quite clearly at that point, now may be the wrong time, but hey, I'm going to do it later, or now is a great time to do it, I've got buy-in from these folks, or I don't have buy-in, but you know, I need to be able to work with them and encourage them to support me in this idea. We're going to have to move on because we're running out of time. I think that would be true, wouldn't it? Okay. So we're just going to go through another top 10 list, and then we're going to be done. So I know that everybody here must be getting very tired, been sitting in the seat the whole time. I've got the benefit of standing around and being able to walk and move. So
these are in the packet. I just wanted to, some of you already saw that. If you turn from the traits, it's very small. At the top of the back, you found it. There's a list of the top 10 myths.
Okay. So I'm going to go through these quickly. Some of them we've covered a little bit already, but it may stimulate a few questions before we go into the break. Earlier we said they're only born, but I don't know if you know who this person over here is. Definitely not English. She used to be a news reporter and just acquired the skills to be an amazing entrepreneur. And I honestly do believe if there's people in the room thinking, I can't do this, there's no way I'm going to be able to do it, I would encourage you, and that's the reason I'm putting this up here, to say to yourself, yes, it is possible to learn this stuff. It is possible to team up with folks that have got things to complement me. If I've got a weakness, I can work with other people to help me. I can do this. I can actually take my dream to market. I would encourage you to do that. In other words, I'm trying to encourage you to think positively about your dream and your idea and not hold back, okay? The media, I think, again, these TV shows focus a lot, and Silicon Valley is great for it. There's obviously a great deal of innovation going on with a lot of young people, and there's nothing wrong with that. Almost all my mentees are in their 20s, much younger than me, and I think that's awesome. But that doesn't mean people in their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, their 60s, even their 70s can start a business. If you go through some of the homework, and I don't think there's anybody in their 70s in the room, but even if there was, I've mentored people at that age. I think if you go through the homework and you just look at the different circumstances you happen to have, if you're in your 70s, you'll be more concerned about your life savings and your health, for example. But that doesn't mean that you can't start a business, and it doesn't mean that you can't be an entrepreneur. And I think the critical part here is timing. Different age groups have different responsibilities. People like me have kids, you know, and educations to pay for and mortgages to pay. I have to think about ideas differently than younger folks, or when I was younger. I didn't have any responsibilities, it was easy. So I think the critical thing here is don't believe any of the hype. You can do it. If you want to do it, you can do it. It doesn't matter how old you are. You don't have to have a ton of money, especially here in the Valley. People will support you. If you've got a good idea and you do some of the things I talked about, and you are very clear and you have a very passionate vision of a big idea, a big dream, people will fund you. People like me will fund you, okay? And well-educated, well, it is, I'm the least educated person in this room, so, I don't think any of you have got a problem with, the education piece.
Mm-hmm.
Big gamblers. So most people think entrepreneurs are taking these incredible risks. I didn't put risk averse in any of the traits or anything like that. And part of the reason I didn't is because certainly successful entrepreneurs very carefully weigh all of the elements of a plan before they deliver it, and they try and work out as much of the risk out of the plan as they can. Generally, from a gambling perspective, becoming an entrepreneur is no more or less risky than being a corporate manager in today's world. I mean, the chances of getting fired today or your business going out of business is probably just as equally weighed to being successful as in a startup. You just don't know. So again, I wouldn't let risk or the perception that you're going into this ridiculously risky thing put you off. But on the other hand, I do think that you have to be prudent. We've talked a little bit about how do you plan with your money, how much money do you need, what is risk. And what you're trying to do is achieve a balance as an entrepreneur, successful entrepreneur. Of course, it's not the same as leaving the money in the bank. Of course, there's a good chance that you'll lose the money. There is risk. But this is not just some wild bet. That's the thing I'm trying to be clear to you on. If you're going to do a startup, you do not want to be taking wild bets. You want to be very carefully analyzing your idea and all the elements of it and taking the best bet that you can take. Okay? Next, loaners. Again, the press. The value in this little piece here that I would just pass on, since we're moving quickly now and trying to hit our deadline, is that, and I think we mentioned it earlier, is that if you're in a startup and you have an idea, an individual, and you have an idea, that is awesome. That is fine. But if you want to take that product to market or take that service to market, you will absolutely need to build a team. Firstly, as an investor, I will very rarely ever even consider investing in one individual. Okay? And almost every venture capitalist will say to you, 2 is a start. 3 is better. There's 2 reasons for that. Firstly, if you're on your own, you're shouldering everything, all the stress, all the work. It's a very, very lonely and difficult place to be. So if there's a team of 2 or 3 of you, that takes away some of that pressure. Also, if there's a team of 2 or 3 of you, and you understand your own strengths and weaknesses, and we all have them, then the chances are that there's a balance. The management team that's running the startup will have a balance, and it will be much less risky. When somebody wants to give up, the other members of the team will hopefully support that person, and they'll keep going. So it's very important not to consider the media and loaners as being a definition of entrepreneurship, because I don't believe it is. I think it's definitely a team sport. And one of my favorites, and I think this applies really generally to younger folks, but most people that I see that are younger, that are motivated to be an entrepreneur, an enormous number of them get into it with the theory that they can just get rich. They had a friend that was in Facebook, and they're desperate to try and keep up with the number of Ferraris this particular person has purchased. I don't know. This is a very expensive place to live. Everybody wants to get a bigger house. I call it the Jones syndrome, keeping up with the Joneses. Don't get into entrepreneurship if you want to get rich. Please, please do not do it. It's completely the wrong motivation. If you remember, I'm going to almost finish the way I began. If you're going to consider contribution is where I started. I didn't say get rich. I said give to other people, help other people, focus on other people, outwardly focused. Those are the people that are generally successful. If you're focused on money, honestly, I don't think that's the way to succeed. Most people get money as a byproduct of being amazingly good in what they do, no matter what it is. If they're a brain surgeon, or a bunch of people in this room, you're all probably doing very well, I'm sure. That is based on your amazing capabilities. And entrepreneurship is no different to that. Just be clear. You will not just do a startup unless you're incredibly lucky and suddenly get rich. Chances are you will fail several times before you have the success you're looking for. Okay? I think we're going to do a quick Q&A, and then I'm going to finish up. Any questions about any of those things? 2 startups and doing a workshop and 2 young children and all that other stuff. So are you asking about my lifestyle or whether I'm crazy? Okay, so great question. So in this case, I went through the process that you're going through, and I set out a bunch of life goals and visions, which I will share with you at the next workshop. But without giving a spoiler, what I did was I determined the things that really motivated me. Things that really motivate me are the easiest way to relate to them is my vision is all about freedom. So what I'm most interested in life is not about money. I love helping other people. I want to have the freedom to be able to do that. And so generally, I think about the businesses I create based on my own personal motivations and my responsibilities as a father and a husband. And so the reason I have 2 startups is because they're both, in relative terms, out of sync in terms of timing. So the first startup is a little bit more mature than the second. So that's part of my strategy. I got one going. I founded it. I funded it. It's now profitable. So let's call it sort of late stage. It's still small, but it's still late stage, right? It's still in a growth mode. And the more recent one is way behind the curve. We literally just done a year's worth of R&D and just raised funding. So there are different team members. The first one's quite mature. It sort of runs itself a lot more than the second one. So I can do that because it probably sounds a bit nuts having 2 startups at the same time. So they are slightly different in terms of timing. The second thing is I have a philosophy based around, and we've talked about risk a little bit, around trying to invest my time and energy in a number of things. And I have that freedom to be able to do that. And they're in totally different markets. So I've invested money and time in 2 sets of intellectual property, 2 different sets of customer bases. They're 2 totally different things. So if somebody drops a bomb on either of my startups, I've still got another one. And I can afford to do that. I can afford to invest in those companies. And because I've done so many startups, I also have the capability to suppress my ego and replace myself. So those companies are going to be run by other people. Right? Which is not necessarily the case for people in this room, because if you're early, and I don't recommend it if you're doing your first startup, you really want to get that experience. It's fantastic. It's like having a new baby. But for me, I have a different investment strategy. Does that answer the question? Okay, just one more. Peter.
When you fund a startup, do you ever talk to the
Yes.
What do you talk to?
Great question. Okay. So the question is, do I ever, if I'm in angel investment mode, ever talk to anybody or the entrepreneurs about the exit? So there's 2 things I'm interested in as an investor with my investor hat on, I guess. And the first one is it a really big idea? Remember that we talked about the big dreams. The second one is the credibility of the people running the business, which is a lot of things. But one of those things is, have they thought about the natural process? If they raise money, what's going to happen next? So some people raise money and they don't realize that the investors are very keen to get their money back, multiplied generally by at least 10. So if I say, well, I'm going to invest in you, this is awesome, and what are you going to do now? And they go, well, we're just going to run this forever, and it was really nice knowing you, we're going to keep all your money and never give you any money back. I'm like, okay. This is a lifestyle business, in essence, that you're asking me to invest in, and it's not a great investment. However, if they say, well, we've thought about that, and we think we can do M&A on this business over, after 5 years, and we've achieved these sort of milestones, or we think we can IPO, or so they have thought somehow about the natural end of that business, then if that's my motivation in the conversation, and I think that's sort of a natural question for me to ask if I don't hear it, and I'm encouraged if they do have an answer to it. In my case, one of the best pieces of advice I was given when I first started out, which is not, it sort of has to be thought about in context, but is very helpful, I think, is start with the exit and work backwards. So if you have an idea, if anybody in the room is thinking of doing a medical device, for example, or those types of ideas which are very specific, I think that you can very carefully think to yourself, well, is there a market for this product, A, and B, is there a Baxter Healthcare or a big company here that will naturally take the product at a certain point in its life? And so from my point of view, I'm very happy to hear when somebody's actually thought that through. I have to go on to the next now because I've just got a couple more of these to do, and then I'll be finishing up. In fact, this is a great point. You've got to have a breakthrough invention or technology. Well, there's probably a whole bunch of people in the room that have got an amazing innovation or a breakthrough technology. There's nothing wrong with that. However, 99% of all businesses today that are successful are iterations, right? The iPod was an amazing success, or still is. Waning a bit now. Maybe the iPad is taking over. But the reason, you might say, well, I'll analyze that. And, okay, well, hang on. The iPod is an iteration that came in 2 years after all these other music devices were on the marketplace. And so don't be afraid of starting a business that is 10 times faster, better, cheaper. It is better designed. It is more effective, more efficient. Okay? Don't be hung up that you absolutely have to have something brand new. Great if you have, but if you haven't, that doesn't mean that you can't do your idea. A lot of people are afraid of failure. I don't blame you. It is scary failing. However, the most important thing here is to think back to what I said before, which was about integrity. I said it's really important that you have integrity. If you take my money, I give you my money as an angel investor, and you waste it, or you do something I don't like with it, which perhaps is less than your ideal way of dealing with the money. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but let's just say that you did that. I'm not going to have any respect for you. I'm not going to fund you again if you fail. But on the other hand, if you give 150%, you're totally passionate, you went through all the walls, you heard all the no's, right? You did your best, and you acted with integrity, you spent that money wisely, you didn't waste it. I will give you my money again and again and again, because the second time you have a go at this idea, chances are you've learned most of the mistakes you're likely to make, right?